Hi, everybody. So I'm here. It just occurred to me as I was driving in today. I'm in Washington, D.C., and it's the last day of the Obama presidency, the last full day, because tomorrow, as we're shooting this, is Inauguration Day. And I'm here with my good friend Christy Winters, who I am hanging out with in person for the first time ever, which is awesome. She's in town for the inauguration and the Women's March on Saturday, probably even more importantly. And I'm going to be there too, and hopefully we'll have about a couple 100,000 people there with us. Yeah, friends, sisters and brothers and everybody else. And it's going to be great. But today we wanted to talk about something that I think is going to be a very important issue moving forward, because here we are facing probably 4 years. Let's not plan on him being impeached.
No.
Let's plan on 4 years. 4 years of a Trump administration. And we're already sort of seeing this phenomenon of people who voted for Trump for whatever reasons, and now they're having buyer's remorse. So we need to figure out how to reach out to those folks and talk to them in constructive ways so that we can get their help, not just for our selfish political benefit, but for what we think is the right direction to move the entire country, right?
Right, because he's going to screw them over too.
In fact, some of them he may screw them over worse than other people. I mean, that's the thing that I know we were talking about this earlier, that he got so much support from working class people,
Yeah.
and they're one of the most threatened groups by the policies he's proposing.
Right. Yeah, he went in promising to drain the swamp, and I think he's got 5 Goldman Sachs people already appointed, a bunch of lobbyists, people who aren't qualified to run the departments. It's going to be a shit show, but it's not going to be the wealthy and powerful who feel the effects of this on public education, on healthcare, on the continuing dilapidated transportation system. It's average working people who, as we're listening to them as they're expressing their ideas, or their regrets or their doubts now about the fact that he told them one thing and they believed him.
Yeah.
And then immediately after he was elected, he started going back on his promises. There was a woman, I think it was an article in Vox about a person who saw him talking about his pursuit of Clinton. And during the campaign, she's wrong, we're going to have an investigation, I'm going to appoint a special prosecutor. And literally within days of his election, he's like, oh, that was just talk for the campaign. I don't actually believe any of that. And if he could say that about something that his crowds reacted to so intensely and churn them up, he's going to say that about anything.
Yeah.
So when they inevitably become disillusioned and feel like he stabbed them in the back, my instinct will be to say, I told you so.
Yeah.
We told you he was a con man. We told you he was a liar. But as much as we want to say that, don't say that to them. Say it to friends.
Right. Yeah. Get it out.
Get it out in a safe space.
Vent it among friends. Yeah, because
they're not the enemy.
Yeah. In fact, they were duped.
Yes.
They were sold a bill of goods.
By a con man. Who's done this his whole life.
Yeah.
His art of the deal.
Yeah.
Is a con.
And I mean, and in a sense, I like. There is definitely a part of me, a very big, loud part of me in my head that wants to do what you just said. That wants to be like, oh, you people, it's too late. Like, where were you 2 months ago? But then you have to stop and think that, I mean, Trump specifically has been doing this for his entire professional life, and the Republican Party in general has been doing it for 50 years, at least. At least this current iteration of what they're doing. And lots of people have believed them, have taken them at their word, and that's just a terrible mistake to do that. And lots of us have done that. I mean, there are people I'm close to, people in my family, who have voted against their direct personal interests many, many times because Republican politicians promised them that they knew how to make things better and that they would make things better for them. And so the challenge is to talk to people who have gone down that route without being condescending, without being a know-it-all, and without condemning them or blaming them, at least not too much, and showing them that if they really care about, like, issues relating to working class people, higher wages, vacation time, paid sick leave, child leave,
basic things,
collective bargaining, workers' rights, like that there's another place that you can go to, and to not just vote for Democrats, but you can have a voice in that party, and push that party to do those things, because they're just more naturally philosophically oriented to do that kind of thing.
Right, and you made the comment about it's not enough to just blindly vote for a party.
Yeah.
You have to demand the policies that will help you. That's the point of representation. It's the point of democracy. It's having someone who will speak for you in the halls of power. And a friend of mine talked about just the other night about Tammy Baldwin, and someone asked whether it was really that important to have someone who was an openly lesbian woman in Congress, and her point was, before I was there, people were talking about me. When I'm in the room, they're talking to me.
Exactly.
And working class people don't have a lot of representation in Congress. It's mostly millionaires and billionaires. So we need to make demands of the Democratic Party to actively represent working people, not just talk about their policies. But to get people there, first thing is we have to recognize that there will be a lot of buyer's remorse.
Yes.
And how people emotionally process a mistake. We have a recent history, that people in 2001 were very much in favor of the Iraq War. And over time, lots of people changed their minds and decided it was a bad idea. We had people who, were against marriage equality. Yeah. And then over time, they changed their minds. And the atheist community actually is really good at, if somebody was a religious person and then realized that actually, I don't buy any of this, I'm an atheist, we're good at saying it doesn't matter what you thought before.
Yes, exactly.
What matters is what you think now. And we're going to start from there. And as much as it's emotionally satisfying in a position where the election didn't go your way, when people realize they've made a mistake, to say, I told you so.
Yeah.
We really need to bite our tongues and not say that. I think this time between the election result and the inauguration, we could have our sour grapes. Yeah. We could have our little frustrations and being angry, but the moment he's sworn in, we need to focus on uniting together to defeat all of the bad policies we know are coming. And we can't do that if we're busy pointing fingers. So if someone says, I voted for Trump and I messed up, or I didn't vote and I messed up, just go, that's okay. What matters is what happens in the next election. So let's talk about the policies. What do we need to stop in this Congress? What do we want to see instead? How do we get candidates that will support policies for paid sick leave, for paid vacation time, for parental leave, for workers' rights, for a living wage, things that will make a definitive improvement in people's lives, and focus on the positive and taking things forward. I think it's fine for us to have had our bitterness and anger, because it's emotional and we care about these things, but we shouldn't cut off our nose to spite our face.
And I mean, I do think I'm a big believer in holding on to anger as motivation, but I think once the inauguration takes place and we're in the Trump administration, that's where the anger has to be directed. Mm-hmm. And it has to be directed and focused. You can't just scream and yell and just rage at the White House. You have to direct it toward constructive channels. And you brought up how the atheist community is good at sort of not holding a religious past against someone if they come to you and say, I've become convinced that I'm an atheist now. And there's a really good analogy to be drawn there between how I'll sometimes, for reasons that still kind of evade me, sometimes people will ask me, like, how do you talk to religious folks, or how do you argue with religious folks? And I'm not all that great at that, but what I tell people is, what works for me is just ask people questions, and not to trap them, mm-hmm. and not to sort of find yourself an inroad into an argument, but just to find out about them. Ask them because you're interested, and because you want to know where they're coming from and what they think, and why they think what they think. And you can do that with politics too. If you're in a conversation with someone who is a Trump voter and they're a little frustrated, or they're feeling some remorse and they're thinking, I can't believe I voted for that guy.
Listen. Yeah. Not talk.
Ask them what's important to them. Yeah. Exactly. Ask them what's important to you. Why did you vote for Trump? What did you hope would happen? What do you care about? What are you afraid of? What do you hope will change in the future? And then you call on, hopefully you're informed on the issues enough, and you're informed on not just specific policies that Democrats have supported in the past, or specific pieces of legislation, but just the overall philosophy of the party. And you can say, okay, if that's what's important to you, and you want to accomplish something in that area, this is the direction that you should be pushing. Not over there, because these people over there, they don't actually care about you. And that's not just an emotional response. You can point to, look at their priorities, look at the kinds of legislation that they support, look at the things that they have said that they want to do, and look at the historical results of when they have been able to enact those things. Look at the impact that it has had on people in your income bracket, for example. And then look at what has happened when more progressive policies have been put in place. So you don't just have to appeal to their emotions. You can do that if that is what they need to hear, and if a person is more receptive to that. But you can also you can call on facts and figures and say, if you care about the working class, then factually, objectively, it makes more sense to involve yourself in the Democratic Party and push Democrats to do progressive things. Because historically speaking, those are the policies that are the most advantageous to working class people.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those are Democratic, party policies. And I think the other thing too is, you don't have to sign someone up to the Democratic Party.
Of course not.
They can they can write letters, they can do stuff. So, I think the first inroad for somebody who's a disaffected Trump voter is to stop all the bad policies that the Republicans are putting forward. Focus them and yourself on specific actions, legislative things that are coming up that you can write a letter to, you can do an email to, you can share things on social media and become an expert on that issue that you care about, or tell them, here's how you can help on this issue that you care about, or I can connect you up, because it's not like we're saying here we're recruiting for the Democratic Party. No. It's about gathering people who are like-minded with similar values and goals to get a policy outcome. And I think if, eventually, I would imagine that given the legislation I expect to be coming from the Republican Congress, if people do get engaged because they're disappointed on Trump on issue A and B and C, there's going to be more after, there's going to be D, E, F, and G. So if you can rope people into not sort of like, all right, I hate on Republicans because I don't like they're the opposition party for me. But that doesn't mean I have to frame everything in that way. And we can talk about specific policy goals.
And in fact, if someone is a Republican that you're talking to, they can use that to their advantage. That can be a source of power for them, especially if they have a Republican representative.
Yeah, I voted Republican the last 5 elections. I'm really disappointed.
I'm a lifelong Republican, I don't see my interests being represented. I don't understand why you supported this policy or this policy or this policy. Yeah. I don't understand why. I'm a Republican, but just for instance, I work with people who are children of immigrants. I don't understand why your policy is so hostile to people from immigrant families. I don't understand why you're creating such a hostile environment for people who are, of different sexual orientations or are women or whatever. If you have buyer's remorse for Trump because you feel like your party has left you behind, because that you feel like that's not what you signed up for the Republican thing for, then let them know. Make your voice heard. Don't let the extremists in your own party speak for the party, because hey, it would be great if the Republican Party actually did start caring about working class people and actually working on practical solutions for problems that affect working class people or marginalized folks because of their race or because of their gender or their gender identity or their sexual orientation or whatever. I mean, if Republicans actually started to care about those issues, instead of trying to sweep them under the rug or just sort of deflect, that would be great, and maybe you can do something about that. But absolutely, you have to make your voice heard.
I think in the next 4 years, we all have to own the responsibility of a democracy a bit more. It's easy to get on social media and tweet. It's easy to go on Facebook and complain. It's easy to have a gripe session with your friends, but we need to move beyond that into more direct activism, which is, contacting representatives staying on top of this kind of news. And we talked about over lunch the quote that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Well, it's not just vigilance. You need to get off your butt. And it's not just about watching, it's about being engaged.
Yeah.
And we have to, if we want a government that represents us, then we have to fight for it, because we are seeing with gerrymandering, with voting suppression, with all of these tactics, again and again, they're trying to limit the ability of people, they're trying to destroy the idea of one person, one vote.
Yeah.
And there's only one way that we can overcome that gerrymandering. There's only one way that we can overcome having the table tilted against us, and that's getting more Republicans, getting more independents, getting more moderates to be willing to vote for Democrats who can counterbalance that power imbalance. And we can't do that by being angry and being bitter and rubbing things, being smug about people realizing stuff that we figured out when he came down Stair Force 1. As John Stewart said.
And you know what? If you are talking to someone who is not comfortable supporting Democratic candidates or switching parties or whatever, encourage them to look for Republican candidates in their primary elections that are more, open to discussing these things. Because the primary process is that part of our election that, relatively speaking, few people pay attention to, and that's when
all the important decisions
are made, and especially on the Democrats have the opposite problem. Republicans in the primaries is when the extremists assert themselves and take control, and with Democrats it's the opposite. With Democrats that's when the centrists take control, and I don't think that's as huge of a problem as some people do, but that's just what happens. Like, the leftists in the Democratic Party have to fight for their voice and their representation during the primaries, and with Republicans it's exactly the opposite. The last couple election cycles, where the extremists, the Tea Party guys, are the ones that get all the attention and take up all the oxygen, and the more moderate or centrist Republicans are the ones that kind of have to fight for air. And if you find yourself looking at the Trump version of the Republican Party and saying that's not what I signed up for, then in 2 years in 2018, in 4 years in 2020, don't just look to the national election. Look to your representatives, look to your senator, look to your people who are up for re-election at the state house level and your governorship, and find people in your party that are more open to your point of view.
And if they're not, then consider running.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Run for your city council.
Absolutely.
If you care about these issues and you're not seeing the kind of representation that you want to see, if you don't think things are being talked about, things aren't being focused on, they're not going in the right direction, don't just look for somebody else. Sometimes the person who's the solution is the person looking back in the mirror.
Yeah.
And you just don't see that person in the role. See yourself in that role. What are you going to do? Stand for election. If you don't win, you haven't lost anything. If you win, you can make a change.
Yeah, and even if you lose, you've at least you've taken a step. Mm-hmm. You've involved yourself in the process, and so I think that's a big thing. If we as progressive people want to reach out to people further to the right who voted for Trump, who aren't happy, I think as much as possible try to make it about they were swindled, they were conned. But also, they can be empowered by this. You can take this as an opportunity to say, okay, it happened this time, but I won't let it happen again, and use it as motivation to involve themselves, whether it's in the Republican Party, if that's where they feel at home, or the Democratic Party, if you can talk them into seeing that if they care about certain issues, that it's just more practical to focus your efforts on Democrats than Republicans. Wherever you get them involved and show them that they can actually have a voice in this process. And that there are practical ways to push for the things that they care about, especially if you're talking about practical, like meat and potatoes, economic issues. That's what you hear every election. It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
You hear that every single time. That's ultimately what people decide their vote on. And those are issues that you can have something tangible. It's not a social issue where there are some people who for whatever reasons just don't feel connected to social issues. Just don't they might think, oh, same-sex marriage, that's nice, or same-sex marriage, I don't like that, but it doesn't move them one way or the other. But if you start talking about something that's going to affect their paycheck, then you've got them. And if you can show them that there are things that they can do to either push the Democratic Party to look out for people, to do a better job of looking out for people like them, which I agree they need to do a much better job of doing that, or maybe drag the Republican Party to actually caring about people like them, which is a much longer drag.
Yes.
But it's still,
it's not over an ocean.
It's
you could in theory be done.
You could do it, yeah.
There have been moderate Republicans.
Yeah, once upon a time.
Yes.
Oh, children, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there were moderate Republicans.
There were pro-choice Republicans.
Yes.
There were Republicans who voted for gun control, like the Brady Bill.
There were Republicans who voted to raise taxes.
Yes. And
imagine
grant
that.
amnesty.
To illegal immigrants.
Yes. And they were Ronald Reagan.
These
policies, yeah.
It's possible, and it's not outside the realm of possibility of happening again. But so I think that should be sort of the primary message is don't focus on blame or raking up old graves.
Or dancing on, like Schadenfreude, like, I told you
how's that
so.
Trump doing now? Yeah.
Yeah, do that again. Do that, but in private.
We'll do that amongst ourselves.
Right.
We'll have some private Google Hangouts where it's just us, nobody else is watching.
Yes. Get it out of your system, because it won't help. It won't convert a single person. It'll only make you feel good in the moment. But long term, we need to bring people on board, and that's got to be our goal. It's 2 years, 4 years, every election.
And see, you actually have experience working in politics. I have no actual experience actually working on campaigns or working in offices, but I think we both have sort of seen, like, it's really frustrating to have to focus on that practical side sometimes, because a lot of us are idealists and a lot of us have this vision of how things could be, and you focus on that, and when you realize that maybe you're not going to get that this time around, it can be a bitter pill to swallow.
And you want to shut down.
To settle for whatever you can get. But that's what you have to do. At least from where not everybody agrees with me, but that's what you have to do. You keep pushing as hard as you can, but when you hit that wall and you can't push any further, then you have to stop pushing. You can't just stand there and kick the wall.
Right.
Like you have to figure out what you do then.
How you go forward.
Exactly.
There's a story, I just got into Hamilton, become a huge Hamilton fangirl, but there was a story of Hamilton after the Battle of New York, where they had to flee from Brooklyn. Washington and his troops fled Brooklyn. They decided to stop just outside of Harlem and stop there because the British weren't coming forward. And there's a story of George Washington walking through the troops, and most of the men were just devastated. They watched their home city being taken over by British troops, and they were crying, they were upset, and Hamilton was digging in earthworks. He was just in the ground already, getting ready for the next battle. And Washington said, that's a guy I need to talk to.
Yeah.
Or somebody said this. And that's kind of like, there's a time for crying and feeling sorry for yourself, but that's not going to fix any of the problems. You have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, get back in the game, and find a way forward in any way you can. And the other thing too that I think is important is that when you write a letter, that's not the end, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, here's a petition, I signed it, I've done something. No. I think you should call every member of your state assembly, your state senate, your Congress offices, and get to know the names of the staffers who answer those phones. Hey, Jerry, Sally, Manuel, whatever. It's Christy again. I'm just calling to check on that bill. How's it coming along? Are you going to schedule a hearing shortly? We need to be more involved in our democratic processes. We have to watch these things and pay attention to them. It's not enough to just write a letter and go, oh, I've written one letter, therefore I should get the policy I want. Unfortunately, democracy is going to take, I think, a lot more work in the next 4 years to undo a lot of the damage that we're going to see coming, and that's already been done.
Yeah, but I mean, sort of direct democracy, which isn't really a thing in the United States, but direct action against your politicians or a direct engagement. Voting didn't get the job done this time. So, I mean, the next chance we get to vote on a national level is 2 years. But in those intervening 2 years, that's when call your congressperson, call your senator, write letters, go to meetings, organize, donate if you can afford it, donate to your local parties or local
a group, an activist group that you care about.
Yeah, exactly.
An environmental group or a labor group,
exactly,
or whatever else.
Exactly. I mean, and keep active. Don't just sit around and wait for the midterms. I mean, I think everybody needs to show up at the midterms.
Yes.
But
that's the end of a 24-month activism plan.
Yeah, because I mean, think about this, fellow progressive people. The very first thing that the new Congress did when it got into town was start to repeal healthcare reform. That was the very first thing they did. And we're just at the very beginning. So it's going to be a very long 2 years. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a tooth and nail struggle.
For progressive, every bill is going to be ugly. Every bill is going to be horrific for us.
Yeah. And we have to stay involved, and we can't just, shake our heads and go,
I can't watch.
I can't watch.
I can't look.
Like, that's a completely understandable response. Mm-hmm. But that can't be all you do. Like I said this in a video a couple days ago, or maybe a week ago. Like that's what got us into this mess. Yeah. That's not the only thing. There's a lot of stuff that went wrong this past election. And it's not all the fault of progressives who didn't vote. But that was part of it. That lack of, well, I don't have to vote this time, mm-hmm. Or, well, Hillary's not perfect, so I'm not going to vote for anybody. Like there was a lot of that going on, and we sort of missed our shot. Yeah. And we don't get another shot electorally for 2 years, so we need to take the shots we can get.
We need
in the intervening year.
Not throw away our shot.
We need to not throw away our shot.
Not throw away our shot. Yeah.
I didn't even plan it.
But it's true. This isn't. I know the instinct to turn away when bad news comes on, and I had a hard time watching the news after the election. That's fine. Take your time, mourn. But if we don't face it down, and the other thing we have to realize as progressives is that the table is tilted against us. We have to work twice as hard and get out twice as many voters just to break even. And it's not fair, and it sucks. Yeah. But that's the situation we find ourselves in. And unless we do the work to change it, we're never going to change it. And we can't count on other people to do it. You have to look inside yourself and decide what you care about, what you want to commit to. And if it's 10% of your time a week, that's fine, but commit to actually doing something between now and every election, for the next 4 years at least, with a goal in mind. Because your work will make a difference. It will add up over time. You'll get more people to the polls. You'll educate more people on issues. You'll get more people who might have otherwise turned off of politics to stay engaged because you got them connected and you were their lifeline. So be that person. Be the change that you want to see.
Martin Luther King famously said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But here's the thing, you have to bend it.
Yeah, it doesn't just happen.
It doesn't bend by itself. You have to bend it.
There's a lot of things we've been handed that have made our lives better, made me freer, made you freer, made a lot of people freer. But we can't rest on our laurels. No. It's going to take work.
There you go. I understand why you don't live here, but I wish you would come here more often. This is so nice.
I know, it's so nice to be in person rather just on a hangout. Yeah, it's really great.
But I'm glad that you're safe in Germany most of the time.
With all my social benefits. Yeah, most of the time, yeah. I'm glad we got it on camera.
Yeah.
It's been a fantastic opportunity to hang out. And, of course, we're going to be vlogging the protest, right?
Yes.
So this won't be the only video.
We will be at the Women's March.
Saturday morning?
On Saturday.
And I will show my political prop gag at the time, which has changed slightly from what I said on my channel. So I'll save the special reveal till later.
Okay.
Something to come back for.
A cliffhanger.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Bye, everyone.
That works.
Yeah.
Only 19, but my mind is older. These New York City streets get colder. I shoulder every burden, every disadvantage I have learned to manage. Underground, I walk these streets famished.